we understand is that 70% of the world's poor are women and girls, and so what that means is that the people who are really experiencing the hardest kind of impacts of climate change do tend to be women and girls. But we also understand that women and girls, due to kind of norms in different societies, they don't have easy access to social protection mechanisms that can support them when they're facing a crisis.
So women in different countries and regions could be affected differently, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been doing a lot of research over many years on this, and what you tend to find is that because of different roles and responsibilities in society, women and girls are often a little bit more vulnerable. They have different kind of livelihoods in many societies, so they might be doing kind of more smallholder agriculture, for example, which doesn't have the kind of large extension scheme support that men tend to get access to. They also don't have easy access to cash and other mechanisms of support, whether that's in the case of, let's say, a drought, or whether it's in the case of something more quick and severe, such as, a flood or a typhoon.
Right. Now, the Paris Climate Agreement had specific provisions to ensure that women get the support they need to deal with the climate crisis. Are they speaking about this at COP26 today? And give us an idea of what that support would look like.
Absolutely. So at Paris, they agreed that there needed to be something called a gender action plan, or indeed, that was actually something that came before. It was then practiced for a few years, and there were some gaps that emerged. So the action plan itself, each country was supposed to sort of adopt it in their own context, but they weren't effectively resourced. And there are national focal points that weren't really given the sort of power that they need to be able to, affect change and gender responsive programming. So last year, or the year before, in fact, at the last COP, an updated, enhanced gender action plan was agreed. And at this COP, it's really, we're looking for the finance to be put down. So there have been some announcements this morning. I know the UK government has pledged an additional £165 million to support gender equality in programming. I also know that the Canadian government has announced that 80% of their climate finance will have some form of gender target or indicator. So we're moving in the right direction, but what we need to do is also ensure that that's cascaded down at the local level, because sometimes pledges come with good intentions, but they don't necessarily reach the most vulnerable and excluded women.
Right. It always seems to come down to financing. Now, only about 9 of the 130 leaders at COP26 are women. And it's often young people leading climate change. They're women. And these women are mocked most of the time, unfortunately, by the men in power. So how can change come about if women can't even get a seat at the table?
I think it has to be done by every single one of us. We all have to take responsibility for this. So I can give you an example. I've been at COP and I've been frustrated because I see so many panels that are full of men, and often really well-meaning men, but we have to shift the norms in every part of life, including at the COP. So when I was hosting a panel last week, I made sure that I believe it was about out of 9 panelists, I think 7 were women, and they were from all over the world and of different ages as well. And they were incredibly compelling because they're doing a lot of work. So a lot of people sort of came up and said, wow, like I was really inspired by particularly the young women on the panel that you held. So I think we have to take responsibility in every facet of our lives to make sure that women are at the decision-making table and are also celebrated for the leadership that they're already taking. When
Hmm.
it comes to the sort of negotiations, it's also much like other forms of intergovernmental negotiations. You tend to find that you have a few women, but they're not in those kind of side conversations where the real decision, the decisions are not always made in the negotiating room. There's often a lot of strategizing that happens in
Right.
male only spaces. And so we need to make sure that we avoid doing that, even if it seems harmless that a few different government actors get together on a more sort of social level. They're often in spaces that women can't access, so we need to make sure less of that is going on.
Okay. Director of Programs and Research at Climate Outreach, Amiera Sawas, thank you so much for joining us here on the NewsHour.